What's up, Net Soldiers? I'm Net Alliance, and I have a pretty interesting video for you guys. Before we even begin this video, I just wanted to ask you guys a quick question. You can either write down the answer in a piece of paper, or just leave it in your head, or you can leave it in the comments below too. This is the question. What is the best way to watch the Star Wars films? So go ahead, write your answer down, or remember it, whatever you want to say. It's most likely going to be episodic or by release date. So episodic would be like 1, 2, 3, Rogue One, and thereon and so forth, and what have you. And release form would be 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, Rogue One. So usually those are the two forms that are chosen to watch these films in. But what if I told you there's different ways to watch these films and get different perspectives? It's pretty interesting for sure. So what this video is going to do, it's going to be explaining all the different ways you can watch the Star Wars films and get the different perspectives through the different ways you'd watch them. And of course, you'll understand more of what I'm talking about as the video goes on. But if you enjoy this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And let's begin. So for our first order, get it? First order? Anyways, for the first order, we have episodic form. Now this is probably the one that most people actually use. They watch it from episode 1, then they watch episode 2, then episode 3, then Rogue One, then episode 4, then episode 5, episode 6, and episode 7. And the reason people choose to watch these movies this way, or at least the way I like to watch them this way, is because it's a chronological order. It all makes sense. Each movie leads on to the next one. There's not really any extra surprises that go on with it. Now, of course, there are some setbacks with this order. First off, you automatically see Darth Vader in a different light. We experienced his growing up pains, we've seen him turn to the dark side, and we feel more for him in the original trilogy. So if you do watch it in episodic form, Darth Vader's character is completely different from what you would see if you'd watch it in maybe the release form. But I don't know, there's just something about it that I have to just watch it 1 through 7. Do you know what I mean? I just have to just sit down and watch them all that way. It's always been the way I did it, so I just like to do it that way. Now, another con about this way is because we have episode 1, 2, and 3, and 3 has so much action, and so there's always something going on in episode 3 that when you get to episode 4, and it's kind of more of a slower tone. I guess that's why they made Rogue One 2, is to kind of like ease that tone out to push you into episode 4, and then you're not as riled up. But the problem before was you'd watch episode 3 and you'd get all like hyped and stuff, and then you'd watch episode 4, and it's a fun film. It's a great film, one of the best in the series, but it is tone-wise kind of boring compared to episode 3. So I do think that that's kind of a problem. But with Rogue One, that kind of did fix it a little bit, so that's good. And with all these statements, this is just my opinion. So there you go. For our next order, we have the release order, which is 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3, 7. Now this is what I was talking about earlier. Episodic form will kind of show you more of Anakin before he was Darth Vader, so you kind of feel more for Vader later. This time, you definitely don't feel for Vader. You kind of have like a clean slate, you hit the wall, and Vader's a bad guy. And then we say 4, 5, and 6, and so we kind of experience, oh wait, Vader is Anakin, oh okay. And then we go back and we watch Anakin's story as he grows and turns evil. And then we jump back to essentially Luke's story again, in episode 7, where we meet Rey and all that stuff. And of course, you can watch Rogue One. Now, the cons for watching in release order. So you have 4, 5, and 6, which are great films, but compared to the prequel trilogy, they have less action. They have like next to no CGI in them, which is really impressive for when they were made, and how well that stuff holds up. Compared to like episode 1's and episode 2's CGI gets a little messy here and there, but it's different type of tone going on too. I always said that episode 4 through 6 felt more like a space fantasy or a space odyssey, and episode 1 through 3 feels more like a science fiction, and I think that's something that really makes people mad. An example of this is in episode 4 through 6, the Force was explained as being this magical thing that's through, that lives in everything and flows through you and all that stuff. And in episode 1 through 3, it's explained through scientific form with midichlorians, and something that people really hate. I don't really think it's that big of a deal. A lot of people are really against that. So that's a good example of what I mean when I say one half is space odyssey and the other half is science fiction. So episodic order and release order are definitely like the two most used forms of watching these films, but there are different ones. So let me jump into the third most famous one. This is the Machete Order. Now, if you haven't heard of the Machete Order, it's pretty interesting. So first, it starts with episode 4. We have Luke Skywalker, and we learn of Anakin Skywalker, who was killed by someone named Darth Vader. And of course, we meet Darth Vader, we grow to hate him a little bit because he's the bad guy. Then episode 5 comes along, and at the end we find out, wait a second, Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker. Oh my gosh, how'd that happen? Well, then we go all the way back to episode 2. That's right, Machete Form actually suggests that you skip episode 1, or you can at least choose to put it in or not, because overall, although episode 1 does show how Anakin is found by the Jedi, it doesn't actually add much to his turning, because we don't really see anything dark happen in Anakin's life at that time. I mean, you could say Qui-Gon's death could impact him, but we didn't really see rage in the young Anakin at the time. So you can actually either add that to the story, or you don't have to, because essentially Machete Form does show Anakin's story, but in a different light. So then we watched episode 2, and then we can see him kind of falling towards the dark side. And then episode 3 comes along, and then we find out how Darth Vader came to be, essentially how Anakin became Darth Vader, how Obi-Wan came into the ability to have Anakin's lightsaber, all that type of stuff, even how Yoda got to Dagobah, do you know, that type of thing. And then we jump to number 6, and so what this would do, we'd have episode 5 where we'd end with, okay, Vader is Anakin. Okay, so how'd that happen? So then we find out how Anakin became Vader, and now we go to episode 6, and we see the final culmination of these two stories finally meeting at a head point. So I really like the Machete Form too. It's definitely a different way to watch these films, but I definitely think of it. It's very interesting. And so then you'd go to 7, and like I said, you can either watch Rogue One in there. If you want to put Rogue One in there at some point, you can do that too, or you can watch episode 1 right after episode 5 too. You don't have to, but that's like one of the things that you can choose to do that. So that's pretty interesting form as well. Now, these are two different forms that I actually created myself. I don't know if maybe someone else got to it first, but from what I saw, I was the first one to make these stuff up. So this next form, it's called the Flashback Form. So now what happens, you actually start with episode 7. Now hang in here. It's actually pretty interesting. Just hold on. So you start with episode 7. Now, I feel like if you start with episode 7, you can kind of get more of like the newer, younger people who haven't seen Star Wars before into what Disney is trying to create. So you kind of get like this interesting feel of, oh, this is what Star Wars is. Now I'm going to see what Star Wars was. And so you kind of go back and you see all these different films. So like I said, you start with episode 7 and you meet Rey and all that stuff. And then at the end, you meet Luke Skywalker. And then it's like, oh, well, what's Luke Skywalker? How did he get to this point, essentially? So then we go back to episode 4. We experience episode 4. Then we go back to episode 5. We experience episode 5. Then we go episode 6. And then we essentially meet Anakin Skywalker. Now, technically, we met Anakin in episode 5. But episode 6 is where we actually see Anakin return. So then we go back and we watch Anakin's story. So we watch episode 1, then 2, then 3. And then we go back and we'd watch like Rogue One if you want. You don't have to really throw that in, but you can. And then after you'd watch episode 3, that's when The Last Jedi would come in and you'd watch episode 8. Because now we've seen everyone's story up to this point. We know the characters, we're good to go. So I think that'd be a pretty interesting way of watching the films. And now for the final order that I came up with. This one's very similar to the Machete Form, but it kind of switches up the placements and stuff. So it's called the Jump Form. So the Jump Form, essentially what it does, it introduces us to Anakin in episode 1. Then we kind of see him grow in episode 2, kind of get closer to the dark side, but we don't really notice that as much, especially if you're a newer watcher. Then you watch Rogue One. Now this, of course, would then introduce you to episode 4, where you meet Luke Skywalker and you find out in the beginning that Anakin Skywalker was killed by Darth Vader. We see Darth Vader, we hate him because he killed Anakin, the character that we got more invested with in episode 1 and 2. And now we have episode 5, where we find out, holy crap, Vader is Anakin. How'd that happen? Well, then we go back to episode 3, where we finally finish that storyline and we see how exactly Anakin became Darth Vader. And then you'd go back and you'd see that story come to a head point again in episode 6, and then you'd watch episode 7. And like I said, you can include Rogue One in there, but you don't have to. So those are all the different ways to watch these movies. Of course, there's more. You can just watch them in random order too. It's your life. You can choose to do whatever you want. But I think these are the most efficient ways to watch these films. So go ahead, let me know in the comments below which way is the best way to watch the Star Wars movies for a newer user or for someone who hasn't watched it for a very long time. Let me know in the comments below. Please remember to like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.